Well, up at 5 a.m. in the morning the other night, I was watching a video made by M&J TV where he expressed his idea to make an Earth-type Pokemon. And in that video, he addressed some controversies that might be a problem with the Earth type, and he suggested that in order to fix the Kanto gym leaders lineup, he would keep Rock as a rock type gym leader and Giovani going from a ground to a normal type gym leader, because his Earth type envision made it so that way ground and rock would become one type. But that really got me thinking, what if every gym leader in the Kanto region got a retyping in order to get special balancing, in order to make it easier for the player to enjoy the game properly? Because if you look at the lineup for gym leaders, if you're choosing which starter you really want, you're gonna realize pretty quickly off that Charmander is far by the worst one. Yet it's surprisingly the most loved of all of them. Don't get me wrong, I like Charmander too, but I'm personally a Squirtle guy. So, I took it upon myself to retype and make it Team 4 every single gym leader in the Kanto region, starting now. A little side note before I start this video, I would like to let it be apparent the reason I took Wednesday off from making a video and Friday was for an April Fool's video, because I wanted to get enough time in order to record all of it and then put my audio over it. Yet, if you're seeing this in the background, I forgot to record the entirety of me beating the game. Brock is probably the most notorious of the gym leaders pretty much ever, and that's because he's so iconic for being a difficult gym leader at the start of the game, a proof towards your testament of power at such an early point in the game. And I do like this, but I think Brock is a bit too overpowered, considering that one of the prominent starters that you're going to be starting your game with is very, very weak to all of his Pokemon, being his Geodude and Onix, both of which are ground and rock type, and obviously are super effective against Charmander with two different typings because of that. So, I've offered a very easy solution of changing his type. Now, when I was thinking about this, I thought to myself, what's a type that not every starter is super effective against, but something that they are all neutral against? You remember, each starter starts off as grass poison, being Bulbasaur, pure water as Squirtle, and fire as Charmander. So, the real decision is, how can it be balanced out so that way none of the starters are in an unequal position in which one you're picking? Because if you look at the mapping for these games, Bulbasaur is definitively the best Pokemon. If you choose any other starter, you're basically making the game more difficult for yourself. So, I really started to think about it. So, when I was thinking for Brock, I was looking at the type chart, and I decided that the most fitting for his character, and also one that's balanced out for each of the starters, would be a fighting type gym leader. Mainly because it's kind of a pun on the fact that it's a gym, and you go to a gym to fight and train. So, when I was looking at the type chart, I said to myself, poison, it may be resisted by fighting, at least to my knowledge it is, but if you really are dedicated enough to get Bulbasaur a poison-type move that early into the game, I don't really think there's any purpose in doing that. So you're gonna be primarily locked into fire moves, water moves, grass moves, and if you catch your local Pidgey, it's gonna be very easy to fight against him. However, make no mistake, I still want Brock to be a difficult and stern gym leader. That's definitely going to give you a booty spanking if you're underprepared. Which is why I've decided that for this video, because they're so closely related, Kanto Pokemon and Johto Pokemon will be allowed for the team matching ups. So, for Brock's team, I would decide that the three Pokemon that he should have are 1. A level 8 Machop, Number 2, a very, very, very illegal and underleveled Machoke, which probably would only have like one move, and it would be at level 10. The reason that I want to put Machoke here is to show a stern and challenging aspect to this. while also keeping him underleveled, so that way it's not too difficult for the player to fight against him. This is a similar way that Faulkner takes the way that you fight the first gym. He does have a Pidgeotto to make it easy, yet he also has an underleveled Pidgeotto, which may be weaker, but it still shows the certain aspects that a gym should be leading you off with. When you're going into a Pokemon gym, you should understand the aspect that this is not something that you should be taking lightly. Some gyms are going to be quite difficult. So, for his third Pokemon, I decided that Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan and Hitmontop would be a little bit too powerful, so I decided that a good alternative would be Tyrogue. It's a all-rounded Pokemon, and depending on what starter choice you made throughout your game, if you were to rematch Brock, it would evolve into a different version of the Hitmons. So if you chose Bulbasaur, it would be Hitmontop. If you chose Charmander, it would be Hitmonlee. If you chose Blastoise, it would be Hitmonchan. For Misty, I think that a proper retyping for her would be the Fairy type. It's a fitting Pokemon retyping for her character, and it's also quite a strong type that, if you have chose Bulbasaur, you will get an actual reward for doing such, still making Bulbasaur a good and reliable choice for your first starter, while keeping it evened out between the other two because they still have a close tie-in. So, I think Misty would be a great choice for a Fairy-type gym leader, and this is what her team would be. I think Misty would also be a gym leader with 3 Pokemon. Don't worry, I'm not going to do this like Kalos, where every gym leader only has 3, and refuse to go over this. But I think Misty's team would be a respectable 20-level Pokemon, with a Clefairy as her first Pokemon being at level 18, her second Pokemon being a Wigglytuff at level 19, and her ace Pokemon being an Azumarill at level 20. I think, obviously, Clefairy is a great choice, and I think Clefable is just a little bit too powerful, getting access to moves like Moonlight, whereas Clefairy only really gets Metronome, so it can really use any move. Whereas Wigglytuff also is not the greatest Pokemon, it's a little bit frail, but it is evolved, so it's a bit stronger. And Azumarill retains to Misty's originally Water-type gym leader status, while also giving her a mix with the Fairy type. And again, giving Bulbasaur a little bit of an upper edge if you decided to choose him as your starter. For the last of the gym leaders that's going to have 3 Pokemon, we have Lieutenant Serge. Now, when it comes to Lieutenant Serge, one thing you'll notice is that he is the first of the Kanto gym leaders that not a single one of the original 3 starters has any super effective qualities against. And I really like this, because it gives you a slight challenge and reinforces the rules that you are going to have to catch some other Pokemon if you want to keep progressing, and that Bulbasaur is not going to be carrying you throughout the entire mission. So, I want to reinforce this, actually, rather than keep it away from that. And if you're noticing by now, I'm going to be one by one rewarding each starter based off of your placement for it. So, to reinforce the mentality that no Pokemon is going to be great against Lieutenant Surge, I think that his new typing should be Steel type. Now, my main reasoning for this is it's a nice and strong type that most of the starters are not great against. And I think that's a good thing, because I think it's going to punish you and make you want to explore more, catch more Pokemon, get your feet around, and get some better Pokemon in order to fight him. The first of Lieutenant Surge's Pokemon would be a nice and respectable level 24 Magnemite. I think Magnemite is quite the strong Pokemon, and it is going to penalize you if you did decide to choose yourself a Squirtle like I probably would have. But it's also a reason that I think you should keep exploring and go maybe find your way to Diglett's Tunnel and get yourself a Diglett. And that's another reason I chose the Steel type. I want you to still be able to go to Diglett's Tunnel, get yourself a Diglett, and have a good chance at beating Lieutenant Surge. But I also want there to be a little bit more of a challenging aspect to this, which is why I think Lieutenant Surge's second Pokemon should be a level 25 Skarmory, which, if you don't know, it's a Steel Flying type, meaning it's completely immune to any ground moves. So you might have to go catch a Growlithe a couple routes backward, rather than, you relying on that Diglett, which is something that I don't want you to be doing. I want you to be using multiple Pokemon in order to fight against your gym leader and be well prepared for it. Because I want the reinforcement of a difficult fight that should not be easily breezed through. However, I think this kind of self-contradictory leads into the third Pokemon at level 27, Scizor. It has a 4 times weakness to fire, so if you've chosen a fire Pokemon back, it might be a little bit easier for you to fight against this. But I think Scizor is a respectably strong Pokemon, even if it's the same base stat total as its predecessor in Scyther. It's still quite the strong Pokemon that is not something that should be easily glanced over. So far, my most, I guess, choice would definitely be Erica, being the 4th gym leader, and the first of the gym leaders in this that will have 4 Pokemon as her base team. It's kind of an iffy choice for me here, but I think that Erica would become a ground-type gym leader. Now, my goal here was to reward primarily just the Squirtle line. However, whatever other Pokemon I picked that Squirtle would be good against would also either diminish the chances of another Pokemon or reward the other. So I decided that the best-ish typing for Erica would be ground type. It does closely relate to her character. She likes plants. Plants come from soil. You can kind of see the connection here. But I decided that this would be kind of the Pokemon that she would be specializing in. And speaking of Pokemon, her full team would be, I mainly think that Erica's team would compose of a Rhyhorn at a respectable level 31. It is quite the jump, but I think that your primary goal when going into Celadon City is, you hit the Pokemon Tower, then you go to the game corner, you stop all that, and by then you're going to be quite leveled up. So I think that a level 31 Rhyhorn is a pretty respectable start after the Rocket Game corner, and that's my intention for the path that you take. Next up is her level 32 Sandslash. It's quite I wouldn't say fast, but it's not exactly a slow Pokemon. It sits in between that range, and it's very good at hitting digs, and if you're using a dig against it, it can hit you with a very powerful Earthquake, and, I just think it's a good typing. Well, not good typing, but, good attacker. Next up is the very swift Pokemon in Dugtrio. A nice, very quick hitter that's going to do massive amounts of damage very quickly with earthquakes, digs, bulldoze, magnitude, all that stuff at level 32 as well. And finally, her ace at level 34 would be a Donphan, rolling at you with very quick rapid spins, gyro brawls to get rid of stealth rocks and stuff, hitting you with earthquakes and, your magnitudes and stuff like that. She could have Ice Spinner, a lot of good moves that it could be using. And I think that's why Donphan could be her ace. It's just a nice, strong Pokemon that can hit quite hard, even though it's a single ground type. Next up for Koga, the 5th gym leader, instead of going for a poisonous and toxic ninja, I decided to go kind of the opposite route, but also not too far away from his personality, and instead I decided to go for a cold-blooded ice-type gym leader. And I think that, obviously at this point in the game, for some reason they decided, hey, let's make a jump from the early 30s to the mid-40s in the level gaps, because that's smart. I'm sure for a fact that all the trainers who played this game will fight every single trainer before getting to the gym and be able to reach the 40s by then, right? Yeah, no, I was still level 35 by the time I fought Koga's mid-40s Pokemon. I was very underprepared. I don't like that he did that. So I think that a mid-30s team would be a lot more respectable. So, for his first Pokemon, I think Koga would lead off with a Sneasel, being a nice Ice-Dark type. It is quad weak to fighting. However, I think it still is a nice, quick Pokemon that, can do a good amount of damage. And then, after that, would be a nice and strong Hilo Swine, doing some nice ground moves and Ice-type damage. allowing for a little bit of coverage against those nice and pesky fire types, and being able to do some ground damage against them with stabs. So after that, I think he would have a nice and respectable Jinx. It's a nice ice psychic type. It can do some pretty good damage, and it's overall just a really good Pokemon. But I think his ace of his team would be a Lapras. It's a really bulky, really strong water ice type. It can take a lot of hits, and it can take out a lot of damage. It's very strong, and I think it would be a great choice. Next up is Sabrina, the originally psychic type gym leader, and now hitting the part where every gym leader beyond this point is going to have 5 or more Pokemon. And I think that her team would be based off of the fire type. It's a nice, strong type, and it's, very good, very abundant within the first 2 regions. And I think it's just a good type to replace the psychic type. It could turn Sabrina's originally cool, calm, and collected, mindful attitude into a vengeful, hot-headed, mind-reading attitude instead. So, I think the team that she would have would consist of the following. I think the typing range for Sabrina is now a lot more appropriate for her to be having Pokemon in the 40s, like early 40s. So I think she would start her team off with a nice, smooth sailing level 40 on the dot Ninetales, being a nice Pokemon to set up Will-O-Wisp and do lots of damage. Her next Pokemon will be a level 42 Arcanine, also serving about the same purpose, while also being able to lower defenses with Crunch and get some flinches in with some bites. Her third Pokemon, however, would be a nice and strong, but very, very, very slow Magcargo. It can hit some pretty deadly overheats to deal massive amounts of damage, but its 4 times weakness to water isn't exactly helping it that much. Next up is a nice strong Magmar that can do some great damage with flamethrowers and blast burns. It's a very strong Pokemon, very respectable. And as her ace of the team would be a Charizard, but not just any Charizard, hold your horses. A very, very overpowered Charizard in a Mega Charizard. I think that this is around the point where if this were a modern day adaptation of a Kanto game that wasn't Let's Go, because that was just Pokemon Go, but you're locked to a small area, I think the modern adaptation would include Mega Evolution. I think this would be around the time that you would finally be able to get it in your own hands. So I think that you would have to face up against your first Mega Evolved Pokemon at this point while you have your own. And I think Mega Charizard Y would be quite a good choice for this. It's a nice, very strong special attacker that can do some pretty good damage with its fire and flying moves, and it can just be quite the challenge for you if you're not prepared. Next up for Blain, and I think which should probably be the most obvious retyping of all of these, was why the hell is Blain, the fire guy, on an island? I know for a fact, like, they always try to state, oh, well, there's a mountain on it. Where? If I go into any Kanto game right now, I'm not gonna see a massive volcano ready to erupt on that island. No, I'm gonna see a fossil refinery and a mansion, and then the gym. That's it. And then maybe a Pokemon Center if I'm lucky, if it hasn't blown up yet. But I think that a good way to retype Blain would be, making him a water type specialist when he's surrounded by water from all areas. So that's exactly what I'm going with. I think Blain's new team as a water type gym leader would consist of a level 45 Mantine doing strong water type hits and flying type hits. Then also consisting of either a Kabutops or an Almastar, depending on which version you picked. If you chose the Helix fossil, then he's gonna have Kabutops. If you chose the Dome fossil, then he's gonna have Omastar. It's just like, it's which one you picked. Next up is a Quagsire a nice water ground type and one of the best typings ever in Pokemon, period. Very strong typing. Next up in his roster would be a very strong Vaporeon. It can do a lot of damage. It's obviously very strong. And God, I hope he wouldn't do anything evil to that thing because bless Vaporeon, it does not need any more harm done to it, okay? Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Leave it in peace. Let it be. And for Blain's 5th Pokemon and his ace, I think a respectable choice would be a Kingdra. This Pokemon obviously wouldn't Mega Evolve, but I don't think it's that big of a deal, because you just fought against the strongest gym leader in Sabrina who could Mega Evolve. I don't think Blain needs to Mega Evolve. Giovani, the main villain, and the whole reason that I even made this video, would, I guess by your assumption, you would assume that I would have made Giovani a normal-type gym leader, but I just don't think that quite fits him. Sure, he is depicted and seen with a Persian and other Kanto Pokemon that happen to be normal types quite often, such as Kangaskhan and Persian. I think that he would probably go for a primarily grass-type team instead. It seems like a type that fits him quite more, and if you look at Team Rocket, they may be depicted as using primarily poison and ground types, but they also use a shocking amount of grass-type Pokemon. Like, you'd be surprised how many they use. They use Vileplume, they use Bellsprout, they use Crobats, the whole 9 yards. Lots and lots of grass-type Pokemon. So I think Giovani would also have a mono grass-type team, and I think that team would consist of the following. I think that Giovani, being the 8th gym leader, I'm going to cut him some slack here and have his rematch team be the exact same as his first team that you fight him with. And that's because I'm going to allow the 8th gym leader to have 6 Pokemon. I think that he has full right to have 6 Pokemon. He is the, final gym leader. He's the strongest, blah, 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 blah. But I think his team would consist of the grass-type Pokemon, Meganium, a nice mono grass type, but it still can do some setups with Leech Seed and some pretty good grass type moves to set up. But Meganium would quickly die and maybe go into an Exeggutor, which could also help set up some really, really nice and useful trick rooms in order to swap up the speed stats of all the Pokemon in the area. Next up would be Jumpluff, which could use Cotton Spores to set up and potentially sweep your team before the ace even comes out, because it can get quite strong if it keeps using those moves. But once that goes down, a Victory Bell would come out, which would be a nice, strong grass poison type that can do quite a bit of damage. And after that would be the grass poison type Vileplume, which can also do quite a bit of damage. Very strong Pokemon, can also put you to sleep before you take it out. And that would lead into the ace, which would be a Mega Evolving Venusaur. A very strong, very, very strong Pokemon. It's access to a lot of good moves. It gets access to Frenzy Plant, Leech Seed. It gets access to Sludge Bomb. Really, really good Pokemon. Very, very, very strong. And I think that right there would be Giovani's definitive team if he were to be retyped. And with that, that is all 8 gym leaders if they were retyped into having new teams and new type specialties of their Pokemon. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, love me. I hope you guys all have a blessed day, and until next time, guys, adios!